Good morning, everybody. This is our 10, 16, 24, and our call with Bob Locke that is so gracious and kind that he wrote a book to help us, and we're going to ask him any question. Feel free that we're here to help you. And our host today is none other than R-Jack. So I'm going to turn it over to R-Jack and Bob, and thank you both for being here. Thank you.
Well, hi Bob. This is RJax. And I didn't realize I was going to be the host, but here I am. And I do have some questions for you. But if you would like to go ahead and get started by talking a little bit about your new book, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we can go to questions afterwards.
Sure, not a problem, Artex. Let's see. The book was really, it wasn't supposed to be a book in the beginning. It was the result of conversations that I had with community members here at Seeds of Wisdom and Mark Z and some other people that I was talking to. As they were talking about things like, people who, when I told people that after my appointment that I would no longer be consulting and assisting people with creating their trusts, people asked me what I was going to be doing. And I said, well, I'm going to be working on my own projects. I'm going to be taking care of existing clients that I have. And I'm going to be helping people to build teams of professionals based upon the requirements, either for their personal finances or particularly for humanitarian projects. And so I said, well, you know what, I'll do a blog post, because people were talking to me about that. And, how do I find an attorney? How do I find a CPA? And basically the book it's a guidebook, and it's really geared towards, it's good for everybody, but I really put it together to address how do you locate, screen, hire, and manage professionals when you have little to no experience in doing that. Some people go through their entire lives and they never have a need for hiring an attorney, except, maybe their will. And same thing with the CPA. And especially in this day and age where so much of the stuff is AI and is computerized. And so I started writing a blog post, and as I did, then I kind of mapped out on a sheet of paper different things that I wanted to hit on. And as I got deeper into it, it just kind of took on a life of its own. I mean, call it divine inspiration, call it whatever you want to. It, like I said, it wasn't meant to be a book, and it turned into, a 240-page hardcover book that it starts with a discussion that I think everybody here needs to have once in a while. Because when you speculate in foreign currencies like the people in this community have, you end up encountering in your life, just as you do in any other matter, you end up encountering people who are just Debbie Downers. That would never happen. And even if it would happen, you're not going to be the one who could, profit from that. And, you're out of your mind. And in this day and age where you've got all the, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, and, families breaking apart and divorces and things like that, it was just another reason for people to have to deal with negativity. And I resolved early on not to ride a roller coaster of emotions, jumping up in the morning and going out to, some Dinar update site to see what happened and what's going to happen today and that kind of thing. And as I started to write the book, I realized that you really need to have a discussion of why are we here? And does it even make sense? Why are we thinking about building professional teams to manage what for many people is going to be the first time that they've had significant liquid wealth their lives. Most people are more, they're more used to just dealing with debt and making it through paycheck to paycheck. And so I resolved to go back and do a deep research on currencies and specifically on revaluations. And so I go back to the beginning in the first chapter of currency and how it came about and how it evolved, and going back to ancient Greece and Rome and before that, and then started moving forward and looking at things like George Soros and what happened, on Black Wednesday when he broke the Bank of England by speculating about the fall of the British pound as one of the world's reserve currencies, and then I go through what happened in Kuwait, which was very recent, and there were a lot of people that speculated in the Kuwaiti dinar and ended up being very, very well rewarded. And then I look at, how did the Kuwait revaluation come about? What were the factors that were involved that justified it going from almost zero to like $3.50? And then looking at Iraq and present day situation and what's going on there. And then I go into the BRICS de-dollarization strategies that we're seeing unfold right now. And the point of the chapter is really just to say, look, you may doubt yourself because of people in your lives' negativity about speculating in these currencies, whether you're talking about the dinar, whether you're talking about dong sim, it doesn't matter. The reality is that you don't even have to go out to any of the dinar guru sites. All you have to do is just read the mainstream media, and you can see proof that these revaluations are taking place. And if you're waiting for it to just, pop overnight, you may be waiting a while for that, but no matter what, it is going to happen. And so after I get into that, kind of laying the foundation, then I just talk about the practicalities of building a team of professionals and not just hiring somebody, willy-nilly, but thinking in terms of team dynamics and, how is your attorney going to work with your CPA, going to work with your investment manager, going to work with your wealth manager, going to work with a trust manager that you hire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to be different for different people. I mean, some people may need to get somebody who is an art appraiser to, to join their team, and others real estate appraiser. And so it just talks about how do you do that. And it provides case studies that were done on the various topics associated with team building. And then I just go into a series of chapters that deal with locating, screening, hiring, and managing attorneys, CPAs, wealth managers, trust managers, et cetera, and provides lists of questions, preliminary lists of questions that one would want to ask when screening each of these professionals for your team. And then the last chapter kind of puts a cherry on top, and it's a case study on a humanitarian project surrounding homeless veterans and the kind of team that can be built to tackle that kind of humanitarian project. And you can take the lessons from the case study on the homeless veteran project, and you could apply that across any humanitarian project that you want. And that kind of, it kind of completes the thought, if you will, as to when you have built this team, what you can accomplish with it. So that, in a nutshell, is the book. And like I said, it's like 240 pages, got a bunch of references, of the case studies and other sources and things that I use to put it all together. And I mean, it was like passing a stone. Once I was finally done, it was like a big sigh of relief. And I just hope that people found value with it. And I've been really, really happy with the numbers of people who have gone out and bought the book, and I have not found a negative reviewer yet. I'm really, really heartened by the fact that people are finding value with it, and they're understanding it and taking it and using it to create their own plans for their own projects and for their own personal finances going forward.
Do we have any questions about the book or any reviews that somebody would like to share? We've been collecting them for Bob because he's been putting it, updating it. So are there any questions?
Well,
Well, Bob,
there are a few questions. Oh,
good.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Salty.
Everybody gets the book. It's fabulous what he has done for everybody to help. So thank you both. Okay, go ahead, Arjack.
Okay, there are a couple of questions, but I think that maybe I'm going to give some more broad questions that I think maybe will cover some of the ones that have been asked down in the room. One of the things that I'm really concerned about, Bob, and I have been for some time, is I've always been told that our stock market is way overvalued, and that one of these days it's going to just crash. And I was wondering how you feel about that, if you think it is going to just crash and go to maybe zero, or if possibly, we're going into a whole different era of money and currency and how it's used. And I mean, I think everything is going to be very different in the future. And I'm just wondering, the people who have 401ks, how can they protect themselves? I'm just curious how you feel about all that and what you have done for yourself and your family.
It's a great question, Arjax. I look at it, and I look at the market every morning when I wake up, and I have a group that I'm involved with that trades actively, particularly on the U.S. indexes, but currencies as well. And to me, when you're looking at 401ks and things like that, now is a time to be very, very conservative, because the market right now is really illusory in many ways. And what I mean by that is, you think about the things that happened back in 2008, 2009, 2010, and the upheaval that took place when they bailed out the banks because of their illegal mortgage lending practices, right? The things that are taking place right now are so much bigger than that, particularly when you start talking about things like currencies and the US dollar. The signs are everywhere. The US dollar, okay, the people who are buying US bonds, okay, aren't the people who traditionally bought US bonds. So you get countries like China and Russia who are divesting themselves of their holdings, and the major buyers, and then you get the demise of the petrodollar with the death of the contract with Saudi Arabia. We're in danger of what happened in Weimar Germany, when the Deutsche Mark was one of the strongest currencies in the world, and almost overnight people were grabbing a wheelbarrow and filling it up with Deutsche Marks to go down to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread and some milk and some eggs. And people here in the US, we've always, because we had the petrodollar, because of Bretton Woods accords and things like that, you know, we've allowed ourselves to get very, very comfortable with that. And we've let this fraudulent banking system that's completely unconstitutional just abuse our currency and our credit at a level that has never been experienced before in the world. And so, you know, right now, what I would be looking at with a 401k, I'd be looking at diversifying into assets, real assets, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, you know, things that are substance, because that's where the currencies in the world are going. And when enough of the currencies in the world go to that, then the US dollar, they're going to come flooding back into this country, and there's going to be no place to put them, and prices are going to go through the roof. Inflation, I mean, people are upset about inflation right now, and they ought to be, but inflation is being tampered down right now. And they're just hoping, I mean, it's the boy, you know, with the fingers in the dike, and he's running out of fingers to plug the holes that are going to take place. And you know, I hate to sound Pollyanna, but you look at history, and history's a guide, and we're in a very, very tenuous place right now as far as that. And just being out there and investing in stocks, I think you need to be, if you're looking at a shorter time horizon for, you know, retirement, or, you know, having to access those funds, you need to be looking at, because prices of gold and silver have gone up exponentially recently, and they're set to go even higher. And, you know, to me, at least have something that is real and tangible, as opposed to something that's just, you know, paper and an idea that, you know, once the idea is no longer accepted, then that currency goes in the tubes.
Well, that makes sense. Definitely. That kind of answered that question. But I mean, do you think that the stock market is going to crash? That's because I do have sisters who depend on that money that's in their 401ks for, you know, to live on now. And I have one sister who is just now getting ready to go into an independent living, and she's going to, I mean, her costs are going to go up like 3 times as much over the next 20 years as they were for the past 20 years. And she's going to depend on that. And if she doesn't have that money to make those payments, she'll have to leave the facility that she's in and will be homeless. So, I mean, I don't know how to advise them. I'll be honest with you, because I can see that we are in this situation where things are changing like rapidly. So I'm wondering, do you think just the main thing you said was like buy stock, and I mean to buy gold and silver and precious metals?
Well,
Are they easily turned back into cash when you need it?
oh yeah, oh God, I mean, you know, and that's never changed. I mean, you know, the value of gold has been consistent. Where it's risen is in terms of its value against the dollar, and all that shows you is how much a dollar has devalued over the life of the Federal Reserve from 1913. So there are, you know, there's a guy, Andy Schechtman, and I've listened to him a couple of times. I haven't spoken with him, but I know a lot of people who think very highly of him. And he talks about things like diversifying your 401k into precious metals and ways to do it. And I mean, it's become much, much easier. So I'm not talking about necessarily, I mean, ideally you go out and buy the physical gold and silver, and, you know, take it home and put it in the safe, or, you know, someplace, you know, secure. But you don't necessarily have to do that to take part of your 401k and diversify into gold and silver, which are going to go up in value. So I would look at that, and I'll put his information out on my in my chat on Telegram, because I think that's something that people should at least educate themselves about. You know, you may not want to do it, that's fine, but you should at least understand that there are options out there, and what it would take to do something like that for somebody like your sister.
Right. Yeah. That would be great. And I will put her in touch with him and his group so that they can at least talk, because I'm really concerned about her losing, you know, her ability to stay where she is and to make those payments.
Sure.
The other thing I'm concerned about is the banks, and whether you think that they are going to survive the change that we're going through, any of them, or do you think that we are going to just be without a bank, or do you think they're just going to go away? And what about the money that we have in our banks? You know, we need to live, you know, every month we have payments we have to make, and so we can't take all of our money out of the bank. What
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, that really is one of the biggest conundrums that people are dealing with right now, because when you look at it, you know, there will be bank failures. I mean, you know, you look at the FDIC and you look at just, you know, the government with its $35 trillion in debt, and, you know, maybe 125 trillion in unfunded liabilities associated with things like Social Security, Medicaid, and whatnot. You reach a point where big bank failures, they're not going to be able to be bailed out the way that they were in 2010. They're just, the resources aren't there, and the losses that they will experience are so much larger than during the mortgage crisis, that you're going to have some big banks that fail, and honestly, they should fail. And you know, when I think about things like that, it really is one of the simple things that I tell people is there's a commodity called junk silver. Okay. And junk silver is just circulated silver, old coins that dimes and quarters and half dollars and dollars, and that people can get. And, you know, you don't have a lot of money, you go into a coin shop and say, okay, I've got $50, $100. I want to have some junk silver. And they'll give you an envelope with some coins in it. And they're pure silver, and, you know, which they don't, you know, they don't find, you don't find them anymore circulating, right? Because they've always got copper and other things that are injected in them nowadays. And that's just for bartering. Because if the system does shutter, God forbid, collapse, then at least you have some coins that you can use to go down and barter with, because silver will be in high demand. And you know, I think we really need to start thinking about things like bartering, and, you know, antibiotics. I mean, just things that people will need that you can use just to take care of daily needs if it gets to that. And I know that sounds just terribly sobering and you know, over the top, but it is a real possibility from where we're sitting right now within the next 10 years. So the other side of that is if you're dealing with the banks, start looking at your bank very carefully. Look at the amount of debt that they're carrying. And the major banks are going to have some real problems. You know, to me, I would look at things like credit unions. You know, credit unions owned by the members are going to be strong if they're well managed. They are there as a good as a good alternative to the big banks. And this is all talking about, you know, the system implodes, and what the world looks like here in the U.S. The other side of it is, you know, for the people that are interested in these calls, if you're sitting on currencies that are, you know, most people are unfamiliar with and consider exotic, those currencies are going to go up in value related to the dollar. I mean, I think about RGX. The first time I bought $100 trillion ZIM note, I actually did it as a joke, and I bought 3 of them because I was in a coin shop and I was picking up some silver. And while the guy was in back, you know, getting my order, I was looking in the case, and there were these $100 trillion Zimbabwe notes. And I just started laughing, and I looked back, and this old Hasidic Jewish guy, you know, he kind of looked at me quizzically, and I said, "That's pretty much where the dollar's going, isn't it?" And he shook his head, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what's one of those cost?" $10. So I picked up 3 Zim notes. I sent 2 to friends of mine who were bankers, who were knowledgeable about the way the system works and the abuses in the system. And this was going through the whole 2010 area. Well, that you know, those Zim that I bought for $10, if I wanted to go out and buy more today, it had cost me $250. So my investment there, even though I did it whimsically, I've hung on to mine and accumulated some more, and they've been a very profitable investment. I'd put that up against anybody that's investing in the stock market without having to go through any of the upheaval and the ups and downs and the roller coasters that the stock market does. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you mentioned credit unions, and I am a member of a credit union, Navy Federal, right now. And I'll be honest with you, I felt very safe being there.
Sure.
What in the past people have said to go to like Basel III compliant banks and Tier 1 banks, but I just don't know that. I just don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'll be honest with you, because you know, when you switch currencies like we're going to be doing, some people have said that the banks are definitely not going to survive, and that the FDIC only has so much money. I mean, it's in the billions, but when you think about the assets that are in the banks, the amount of money that people have in their banks that right now, you know, that's up in the trillions. And so FDIC definitely will not be able to handle all of that if we lose all of our banks.
Oh,
so that's the biggest thing I was concerned about.
Well, and deservedly so. Like I said, yeah, I mean, it's really easy in this day and age to just go out and do a little bit of research and take a look at the top, you know, 20 Tier 1 banks, and what is their exposure to things like, you know, what is their exposure to loans in default and delinquencies, and, you know, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days delinquent, and how is that growing, and how does that compare to their assets? And you get a feel for that, because you're absolutely right. The FDIC doesn't have anywhere near, when you look at those numbers just for, say, a Deutsche Bank or a Citibank or Bank of America, by themselves, and you look at just what their balance sheet is, and they try to pretty it up, but it's just putting lipstick on a pig. They're incredibly exposed right now, and the government has let them, because from a political standpoint, they need to be able to show that, you know, that the stock market is doing great, so everything must be good, when everybody else is looking around going, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I just got back from the grocery store and I spent twice as much on groceries and got, you know, only about 2/3 of what I got the last time that I went there. So, you know, Basel III compliant, it's great. You're going to asset backed. these banks don't have those assets. They may, you're talking about, percentages of reserves, and the reserves that they're going to have, even under Basel III, will not be enough to cover the losses if things go down the way that they did in 2010. And the government's not going to have the funds. The FDIC will nowhere near have the funds to be able to handle that on a wide scale basis like we had in 2010.
Yeah, that's what's so scary. It really is.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to, even think about putting fear in anybody's mind, but I've been thinking about all of this for some time, and it if you think about if all the banks go, that is a scary thought, because all of us have our money in the banks, or most of us do, and because that's the medium that we're using for making payments. We're going through the bank to make our payments, so that's where our money has to be, and it is scary.
Yeah, and it's partly because of conditioning, right? It's like the push for the central bank digital currencies, right? They start making noise about that. First, they demonize Bitcoin, and then 2 years later, they're talking about, well, we're going to make our own Bitcoin, and it's going to be government backed, and it's going to be good, and it won't result in us turning off your account if you say anything against government policies, right? And moving towards the China model, right, with a social credit score. We've become conditioned to, I don't have any cash in my pocket. All I have is plastic. And I think now is a good time, because a certain amount of fear in the context in which we're speaking, Arjax, is good. People need to look at and educate themselves. Take some time away from the TV, or just going out and messing around on the internet, and just plug in some questions. Go out and use AI. I love AI. I mean, if I have a question about something, and I want a detailed answer, then I have sites that I'll go to that I know, from having tested them, that they're going to give me good information about things just like this. Type in a question and then ask it to, refine and expand its answer, and get the information on, what is the exposure of major U.S. banks to default related to mortgages, commercial loans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and get a real picture of it. And then, because you can't bury your head in the sand and just count on the government to do what it did in 2010, bailing those banks out, because the money's not going to be there this time, because too much of the dollars are already flooding back into the country as we speak.
Yeah. Well, it is scary times. I'll be honest with you, and we all need to at least understand what's going on, and that things might change, and that might cause us to have losses if we don't educate ourselves on what to do. And I think that moving to assets that are not just any assets, but assets that you think might go up in value, like you said, the precious metals. I did that a few years ago. I went ahead and got some very tiny bit of gold because it's so expensive, and a little bit of silver. So those are things that I did, quite a few years ago. But now I'm thinking, I need to do something with just about all my money instead of leaving it in the bank.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's only common sense. We become completely reliant upon the banks. Like you say, I've got my automatic payments for this and that and this and that, going through the bank through my account. And same thing with our credit cards. I mean, and the number of people who are maxing out their credit cards just, for daily survival is going through the roof. You need to look at why that is. and contemplate, worst case scenario. And if worst case scenario doesn't happen, fantastic. To me, every day that goes by, I feel better and better about the speculation that I've done into currencies, because I see things changing, even without, any flip of the switch, global reset, things are changing, and those are making the value of the currencies that I've speculated in go up. And the problem is, for people that have come on recently, they talked to a friend who was doing it, and they said, okay, well, whatever, I'll take a flyer. And they, even if they don't understand it, they sense that the financial system is in a very, very precarious position right now. And so they start to ride that roller coaster. Well, but I've got these currencies, and they're running the numbers in their heads. And if the Iraqi dinar goes to $3.50, this is how much I'll have. And that, to me, is that's a recipe for a heart attack, to tell you the truth. I don't think about it. People talk about values, and I say, you know what? Nobody knows what the values are going to be. But prepare. And do things like, do your research. If things do, if we are, at our appointments in a redemption center, and we're going through that whole exercise, then at least be prepared for it, right? And there's plenty of information that's out there, on my Telegram chat, and that's out at Seeds of Wisdom website, to educate yourself so that you're prepared for that possibility. I'm not saying don't think about it. I think you should think about it a lot, but think about it rationally, and think about it in terms of, what I talk about in my book, right? So, I see so many people who have wonderful humanitarian projects planned out, and the book is just one tool that they can use to kind of hold their hand through the process of hiring the people that you need to make your humanitarian project successful, and to accomplish your goals, in addition to doing things like managing and growing your wealth for generations, if you've got that much, or just managing managing the fruits of your speculation, so that you can don't have to worry about your daily expenses, just depending upon how much of the stuff that you've accumulated over the years.
Right. Well, you've given us a lot of information here to think about concerning banks and stock markets and 401ks. I'm wondering if there's anyone that did not get their questions answered. Would you like to raise your hand and ask Bob right now? I'd be glad to bring y'all on. Is there anyone that still has a question that wasn't answered? I don't see any hands raised yet, but let me scroll through here and see if I see any. Let's see. No, I don't see any hands raised, really.
We either did a really good job, or we did a really terrible job. If we did a terrible job, there wouldn't be anybody on here. So
that's right. I see a question that Jana asked down at the very bottom that was doesn't refer to any of that, and it's from Jana. Will our property taxes change?
So property taxes are a local thing, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you see what's happening right now with property taxes. They keep on going up, and the services provided by most municipalities are going down in quality, and it's kind of a race to the bottom situation. If the currencies revalue and the dollar is forced into, essentially what you're talking about is going back to pre-1913 banking in the U.S. and what they do to deal with the trillions and trillions of dollars of U.S. dollars that are flooding back here, and a transition to a gold and silver backed U.S. note, which is being discussed openly at this point. A constitutional money, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin the tender and the payment of debt. It's a very simple idea, and it worked really well for a long time until bad people took over the monetary system. And so you look at things like property taxes. If the system collapses, then nobody's going to be paying property taxes, and the governments aren't going to be funded, and so they're going to collapse of their own of their own weight, right? Because they're not going to be able to pay their people. And so you're going to see big changes, but that's really speculative. I mean, you'd be guessing to say they're going to go away. I would say first they're going to go up a lot higher, which is going to cause a lot of discontent in localities around the country, and then eventually that system is going to have to be reformed and based upon solid principles, based on solid governing principles like we used to have in this country. But it's a good question, and something to kind of watch for.
Well, I have heard that everything is going to be revalued. Everything, from houses to boats, cars, land, just any commodity you can think of is going to be revalued when we change over. So I'm hoping that, the taxes will just go away. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, I mean, you have to look at it. Okay, so based upon the Federal Reserve System and fiat money, which FDR promised us it wasn't, you end up in a situation where you've got this radical inflation. Well, that system is going to have to go away, and then it's going to be replaced by a system that the Treasury runs, and instead of a private company going out and issuing our currency, it's going to be us issuing our currency. And so yes, there will be revaluation on a radical level down to sound values based upon real assets. And this country has it's got the most incredible group of people ever assembled in the world, and it's got the best system that we can go back to without having to do anything major, and so this country will survive, and you'll get back to values based upon gold and silver. So, right now, gold, I think, is at $2,500, which is just huge compared to where it was, a few years ago. Silver's over $30, I think, and same thing there. And the industrial demand for silver means it's going to be going much, much higher before it goes back and resets based upon not fiat dollars, but on asset-backed dollars. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The gold and silver, I told you I bought that, like, I don't know, maybe eight or 9 years ago. Mine has doubled in value since I've had it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
which is amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, those are commodities that are not supposed to grow that fast, right? But
right.
all that is an indication of how much the dollar has devalued. And that's the way you got to look at it. And so that's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. When you start seeing that, you can prop up the stock market, because they've got, we saw that back in 2008, 2009, 2010, the plunge protection team, right? They could go out there and they could, print a bunch of funny money and buy a bunch of stocks and prop their values up. Well, it's an illusion, but for people that are in the stock market, it's I'll take that illusion, as long as it lasts. Understand though that it can't last forever. And so, you got to start looking at real world, if bad things happened, what would I do to go and protect, what wealth that I do have.
Absolutely. Well, I do see a couple of questions that I don't think were answered. Robin's Nest asked about holding your gold and silver in your home. And she says, what is a safe way to hold these commodities?
And go out and buy a safe. And
okay.
Go out and buy a safe and get one that you can bolt into the floor. And then they all can be bolted into the floor. And more important than that, don't ever tell anybody about it. And anybody. I mean, just it's never, because if the things that we're talking about happen in the near term, all right, people get desperate. And if you tell somebody, and the same thing goes honestly with your currencies. I mean, if all of a sudden this stuff happens, all the people that you talked to about it, who told you you're out of your mind, all right, they're going to be looking to you. It's like a friend or relative wins the lottery, and what happens? Everybody's showing up on their doorstep with their hat in their hands, going, I need help because I didn't plan for this, right? But yeah, you could do that. I mean, there are depositories as well that you can, who are fiduciaries who you can store it with. And if you don't want to do that, then at least look at things like I mentioned before, diversifying your 401k and putting some of it into gold and silver backed assets. I know it can be done. I have not done it myself, and I haven't gone through all of the steps that are required to do that. But I know it can be done, and it's worth looking at. Like I said, I'll pull up the one guy that I do know that I know is very reputable. I'll pop his stuff into my Telegram chat when we get off, and I would say, look at his stuff and as kind of a starting point, and then branch out from there.
Yeah. You're talking about Andy Scheckman, and I'm pretty sure Andy also has some resources of depositories as well that he could recommend, if I remember correctly. I did listen to him a couple times.
That makes sense. I've never listened to the whole thing because I just haven't had the time. But anytime that I've listened to him, I was very impressed.
Absolutely. I remember he was very knowledgeable about a lot of things, and he can help you through with those 401ks. I do remember that. So that's good information. Okay. Lori talked about the Schwab, and she wants to know if you're familiar about Schwab's wealth building protection services.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I've heard good things about Schwab. In my mind, I always look for fiduciaries. I don't want, somebody that is just, they make their money on commission-based product, whether you make money with their services or not. I want somebody who's got skin in the game, and I have heard good things about Schwab. There's another one, is it Fisher? They're fiduciaries, and that's how they make their money. Their fees are based upon your performance. So the better you do, then the higher fees they receive, and that's the kind of group that you want to find and work with, because especially in times like now where things are kind of tenuous, the last thing in the world you want is for whoever is managing your retirement you know, to be incentivized to jack up their commissions so that they can survive at you know, at your detriment.
Yeah. And so do you know if Schwab is a fiduciary?
I really don't. I really don't.
Okay. I will look into that because, you know, with this question coming up about Schwab, it dawned on me my sister's account is with Schwab.
Schwab, yes, so
So,
definitely worth looking at.
yeah, so I think I'll look into that. Okay. Let's see. There's another question here on investment life insurance, and they want to know your opinion on how investment life insurance will work after the economic situation has been experienced. And will the same conditions continue to exist with that life insurance, I guess?
Well, I mean, that depends on whether the company that, you know, issues the policy exists. You know, in things like this, I defer to people like Texas Snake, because that you know, that was his life, you know, and putting together in, you know, helping reduce tax burdens, and using things like insurance as a way to what was it? He calls it his infinite banking scenario, where, you know, basically you know, you set yourself up so that you can withstand pretty much any calamity in the financial system, you know, absent the companies that you're working with going under, right? um, there are ways to do that, but I am not the guy to talk about that.
Understandable. Um, oh, Lori says Schwab does have fiduciaries. So, yeah,
Good.
that sounds good. Thank you,
Good.
Lori. I appreciate that.
Really, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Personally and for the
let me see.
group.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to ask one more time. Does anybody who is on the call right now have any questions? Because we have run through all of my questions and all of the questions in the room. And so if anybody has any questions, now is the time to raise your hand. I'll
Yeah,
give you a second. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. Well, no, I was just saying, you know, I have to start looking at my next adventure here today. So if we're
Yeah,
going to
it's
have to
time for
start
you to
wrapping up.
get going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if anybody has a question
I
right
do.
now, you need to. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, Bob. My question is that I had been working on common law trust myself, and I turned it in Texas, and I got a letter from the voters registration, and they took me out of from voting this year. I called them, I worked it all out, but why would they have thought that I was wanting to be out of the voters registration just because I filed a common law trust?
I don't know necessarily that one equals the other. Um, there's so much stuff going on right now, all across the country in states regarding this election, and some states are going out and, you know, in good faith, cleaning the voter rolls and getting things like illegal immigrants off of the rolls and getting dead people off the rolls so they can't vote, which is, you know, Chicago, where I'm from, that's a very popular undertaking. And so it may have gone too far, you know, to the one side, and you may have gotten knocked off. And so it, you know, yeah, it's just at least they notified you, so then you can say, well, why, right?
Right. Well, and they told me it was because of that I filed the common law, which is funny because my friend did the same thing. I'm Hispanic and he is white and he did nothing. He got no letter. He didn't get booted off, but yet they booted me off my registration. And so, I mean, they took care of it, put me back on. I said, hey, this is an important election year. What are you doing knocking me off? And was
Yeah.
put back in.
Well, and honestly, I mean, just the act of well, first of all, I recording of trusts is for statutory trusts, is the way I've always looked at it. There's no requirement that a common law trust be recorded anywhere. It's just a contract between people, different persons to to accomplish different tasks. But yeah, somebody may have misconstrued that recording as somehow you asserting yourself as a non-citizen, and so they took you off. That's certainly conceivable. I could see it happening, but kind of strange.
Yeah, it was. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just thought of one more question that I have been thinking about, and that is these crypto wallets, and whether you feel that they might be an alternative to us keeping all of our money in the bank. Purchase some of the cryptos that we've been told about, the ISO 200 and 222 or something like that, compliant ones that are supposed to be part of our new quantum financial system, actually. And so they are looking at those to go up. So I'm wondering what you think about all that.
Well, I mean, I've looked at a lot of them. I've speculated in some. To me, right now, the one that seems the safest for the long-term future in terms of ISO compliance and things like that is probably XRP. And I think it's worth looking at. The one thing that I would caution is making sure that you have stored someplace securely a list of whatever what do I want to say, the identification for your crypto, right? The keys. Have the keys there, because the one thing that troubles me about anything in terms of central bank digital currencies, cryptos, is what happens if the power sector fails. How are you going to get access to that, the value of those cryptos? And with the strain that's being put on our system right now, and our systems are old in this country. In some places, they're not being well maintained by the monopolies that that were formed to manage them. And so, just something else to kind of stick in your head and think about.
Yep. I didn't think about that, but yeah, if you can't access the internet, you're out of luck.
Yeah, at least for a period of time,
Absolutely. I've been thinking about those people down in North Carolina that, they're running into that problem. They have no electricity, they have no internet, they have no cell phones, they have nothing.
Yeah, God bless Starlink and Elon Musk. That's
absolutely.
The only way those people are having anything. Well, and I mean, you think about it. There's still 140,000. At least yesterday, there's still 140,000 people in Florida without power. Now that initially it was 3 million. So to think about in a week or less that they've restored the overwhelming number of people back to the system. It's 140,000 people that can't get their banking details.
Right. Still.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions I have. Does anybody, any more? If you have one question that you want to ask, go ahead. Please get that in.
Yeah, because I got to get running here.
Yeah. Well, I don't see anybody raising their hand. Let me scroll down and see.
Well, and if anybody's got questions, you can always just pop them up on the on my Telegram chat.
Yeah, in Bob's room, absolutely. Okay, well, Bob, we certainly appreciate you coming in and answering all these questions for us today and sharing your book with us again. You just have so much information that everybody just wants to know. That's for sure. And we certainly thank you for being here today.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you guys. And it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, Jax.
Well, good. I'm glad you did. And I did too. I got a lot of questions to answer myself. So, well, we thank you. And we're going to go ahead and close out the call then.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye. And thank you all for